Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Keith, hey, it's a Tuesday. We had a Monday night game. We came out with a victory. Pretty good day all in all. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It is a little weird, recording this kind of close to when the game ended. We're less than 24 hours out, which means going back and doing my film study has been incomplete. It was only made it back to halftime doing my film study this week. But
I hear you.
You know what? That's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like last week, we had a Thursday night game, and then we didn't record until Tuesday, so that was like extra time. It felt like forever, almost like we shouldn't even have talked about the game. Mm-hmm. And this week, it's like, woof, we're rushing in, and well, that's good. I mean, we're always ready, so it's no big deal. So we're going to talk about the victory against the Eagles. We're going to move forward and talk about the game coming up against the Giants at home. What all that means. We had a couple of games over the weekend that helped us out. Ended up being 8-3 after this victory, and first place, sole first place in the NFC West, thanks to the Rams and the Cardinals, mostly the Rams. They lost, and
lost to the 49ers.
Lost to the 49ers. That was actually a pretty decent game.
It was. I mean,
look better than advertised now. They got a couple players back, and
the Rams looked awful for most of the game. I mean,
Goff looked awful.
Goff looked terrible.
Yeah.
That interception to
why didn't that happen in our game? I don't get it.
I don't know. Might have something to do with 49er defense versus our defense.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Goff looked terrible. That interception to Kinlaw, a defensive lineman that went for a touchdown was just.
It was a great play by him.
It was,
right,
but I mean, but it was
right
it was a terrible quarterback can't do that. I mean, that was just genuinely awful.
It happens. His arm got hit, whatever.
So
and then the Cardinals lost to New England. New England looked pretty decent. Cardinals looked bad in that game.
Cardinals looked bad, and actually the New England looked okay, but Cam Newton he has not been the same player he was before COVID.
Yeah, they're not throwing the ball very
terrible. He looked awful, and they still won. They still beat Arizona. Arizona's offense is absolutely struggling. They're refusing to let Kyler Murray run or do any of those things since he hurt his shoulder. And when he's not running and teams aren't having to respect his ability to run, and they're actually just able to play standard defense against him, that offense is really struggling. It's odd how much his running ability has been kind of a catalyst for their offense. And
they're just a few players away. When we talked in the beginning of the year about their record and their possibility of being one of the three teams to come out of the West in the playoffs, and they were right there at 9 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins possibly on on the very upside, and they're proving to be just not quite ready. A couple players away, maybe on offense and one on defense, and I think they'll be there next year. I really do. Yeah. The thing with them though is at this point, I mean, they've got a pretty heavy schedule ahead. They may not even make the playoffs, and then you've got
the
Rams
really needed this week.
Who looked like they were going to surge ahead, and all of a sudden they came back down to earth playing the 49ers, and they've got some tough games coming up. In fact, they're playing the Cardinals this next week. So while at the same time Seattle faces its easiest part of the schedule.
Yeah. So that Rams Cardinals game this weekend feels like that's going to decide which, if only two teams make the playoffs out of the out of the NFC West, which I still think all three
Arizona
teams
beats
will.
the Rams, and all of a sudden, the 49ers could sneak back into this thing.
Yeah, because
I know it's a
just brings everything down.
long way ahead, but Mullins is playing better than Garoppolo. Although Garoppolo has hinted that he may be available before the year ends, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
And then the only team ahead of Seattle in the NFC right now is the New Orleans Saints. And again, I'm not terribly impressed with the Saints.
Well, the Saints got to win without Drew Brees this weekend, but they did so because they played a Denver team with no quarterbacks. So they called up a wide receiver off the practice squad to play quarterback. It went about as well as that sentence suggests it would go. And so even though the Saints played
the Denver Broncos with a wide receiver at quarterback had more yards in the first quarter than the Eagles had against the Seahawks. I'll give them that. But that's not saying a lot.
I mean, that's not saying that much. All
right. So, so that's the state of the NFC West right now, and the NFC in general. We won't go through all the teams. There's still a lot of football to be played. The good news is, like I said, Seahawks face their easiest schedule. We've got the Giants coming up. We've got the Jets. We've got the Washington Football Club. And then a couple of games at the end there against the Rams and the 49ers to end it. So it'll be very interesting to see how this thing kind of washes out. It's favorable for Seattle right now, but we got to take care of business.
Yep. The Seahawks have a game up on the Rams and 2 up on Arizona, and they have the significantly easier schedule than both of them,
and games against both those teams to end it. So they might come down to the end where we need to win maybe one of the two, and we still take the division and look pretty decent in the NFC overall. And so we'll see how it washes out. We did take care of business against the Eagles this weekend. Before we get to that, we just had one injury update, not really even an update, just kind of a Carlos Dunlap thing. Carlos Dunlap injured his foot in this game, really kind of went out. Nobody kind of really knew. I found out right after the game, though, that he'd gone out with some sort of injury, and it was, undisclosed as to how serious it was. Come to find out, it's some sort of lower foot injury, like some similar to like Greg Olson had, where it's a plantar either tear or sprain or whatever you want to call it. We just don't know how long it's going to impact Dunlap. He had an MRI this morning. Today's Tuesday. We're recording this afternoon. Haven't heard a word since the MRI was done as to what the significance of that injury is. And so we just don't know what we're going to be with or without Dunlap and how that would impact going forward.
Dunlap's presence was the beginning of this resurgent Seahawks defense, where they went from being historically bad to being competent. And in this game, his injury and his leaving the game went from them being dominant to giving up yards and letting the Eagles stick around in this one and keep it at least somewhat close, even though in the end, I mean, the game was not nearly as close as the score would suggest, and it should have been a blowout, and it was there for a couple minutes until a Hail Mary, but the Eagles definitely were able to move the ball better after Dunlap's injury.
Yes. But at that point, we were kind of in a prevent situation. I mean, before that, they had 9 points. Before that Hail Mary with 20, 30 seconds left on the clock, they scored a 2-point conversion. I mean, that's why it was closer. I mean, and we only gave up like 300 total yards. And then the first quarter, I mean, they had negative yards. I mean, they really did a good job in this game, the defense. The offense is the one that I've got questions about. And we'll get into all that as well.
I want to get your opinion on that 2-point conversion at the end of the game, because
the Seahawks just kind of laid down. I was a little surprised.
I'm not even talking about that. Why do you go for 2 there?
Well, let's see. So what was the final score? 17-23?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
it
know.
becomes a 6-point lead. Why do
He
you go for
maybe
2 there?
maybe he was a little confused because in the prior drive when they turned the ball over, they probably would have gone for 2, and maybe he just had that stuck in his head. I don't know.
Because here's the weird part about that is there was a lot of money bet on that game. It's Monday Night Football. There's always a lot of money bet on that game, and it was a 6.5-point
Wow,
spread.
I didn't think about that.
By that, so the Seahawks were favored by 6.5. If they kick the extra point there, which is what makes sense in every potential actual game scenario,
Unless they were going for the win, man. Just going for the win.
But why do you do it? Why do you do
onside again?
But why do you go? Why do you do it there? Because if you miss it right there, then I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if they kick the extra point, which literally every game scenario say you kick the extra point there, and get within 1 score.
The only thing that would make sense is if you had
cover.
play design and you wanted to test it. You wanted to
why would you put it on
or whatever?
Why would you put it on film
for
other teams? So they literally went for 2 in order to
there was
the spread.
One guy out there that bet $500,000 on the Seahawks covering that spread at 6.5, and lost because it all right on that situation,
on that 2-point conversion. And I am not saying that has anything to do with it, but honestly, the fact that they went for 2, so they covered the spread when there was no reason to other than that. It's weird and kind of sketch. So I don't know. That was this whole thing.
I'm not a betting guy, and I don't really follow those things very closely. So that is an interesting angle for sure. And it definitely impacts. It impacted somebody. Absolutely.
The Vegas made a lot of money because of that 2-point conversion. Because 90% of the money was on Seattle.
Wow.
And if they kick the extra point there, Vegas has to pay a lot of money.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing, but if you just can't break it all down. Now, as far as the overall arching game is concerned, you can't just break that down into that one play. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into point differential and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can certainly highlight that one situation, but Seattle, this should have been a blowout. It wouldn't have even been a question at that point. And I thought the lack of aggressiveness on the offense to close the game out was kind of alarming to me. I mean, something's going on because in the first in the first part of the year, Seattle was putting up tons of points, tons of yards. Russell Wilson was having an MVP year, and since that Arizona game, things have really slid. I mean, the last 4 games have just been quite a bit different for the offense, and the play calling
has been different,
and Russell Wilson, the performance and the offensive line, and the protection, and there's a lot going on right now that is not optimal for this offense.
The offensive line's dealing with a bunch of injuries, and Cedric Abui, he was out there playing right tackle, and for the most part struggling. He was battling. You could tell the effort level was there, but he was struggling. That's a really tough matchup for him. But I think the Seahawks would have been better served by having Shell out there because he's quicker and stronger.
The Pro Football Focus grade on Abui was 36.1, the lowest on the team by far, and one of the lowest of the year.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't pretty, but. I think that has something to do with it. And then you look at all the injuries that they've had at guard and center and trying to make sense of that and make it work. And, Mike Lupati's out there playing, and I think the team would rather him be on the sideline with Simmons as the left guard right now, and Damian Lewis at the other side and Posick in the middle, but that's not what's happening.
I'm not so sure. I mean, you look at the last game with Upati over there on the left side, man, they had a great game. He was probably the best offensive lineman in that game last week, where he had almost a 90 grade overall, 92 something, I think. And then pass protection, he was slightly better than he was at run blocking. And they did both very effectively, 175 yards overall. This week they just did not. So I don't know if they prefer to have him over there. I do believe that he's injury prone and may play with some nicked up injuries that causes performance issues. But other than that, I think if he's healthy, they want him out there.
Yeah, I just don't know if he's healthy. He certainly didn't look it here. He struggled.
Well, he was limping around on the sideline there in the fourth quarter. So.
Yeah, he really struggled. But they in early in the year, he'd start, and come in the fourth quarter he wouldn't play, or he'd sit out for 2 or 3 possessions at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, and then come back in for the down like the last little bit. And I think the team would rather do that with him because he is injury prone and his performance drops off considerably at the end of games when he gets dinged up, and they just can't afford to do that right now with all the guards, with all the guards and centers injured. They just don't have the bodies to play him less. He's got to go the full distance, and it hasn't led to good things.
So I did want to get back to this thing about the play calling and Russell Wilson. So the first 7 games, Russell Wilson had a 120.8 rating, 9.3 yards per attempt. Last 4 games, 92.3 rating and 7.19 yards per attempt. So his yards per attempt has gone down more than 2 yards per attempt, and his rating has gone down almost 30 points. And the play calling, is kind of a reflection of that as well. They're not taking as many deep shots. They don't have as much time. He's getting rushed pretty heavily and having to throw with somebody in his face, or he's having to scramble a little bit. Timing's off, etc. The offense just looks out of sync. One thing I did note, however, in this game is Russell Wilson did complete 7 of 7 on third down for 90 yards in this game. So he did have some efficiency there. 22 of 31, 230 yards and a touchdown with 102.9 rating overall. And that relationship with Metcalf in this game was really special. But other than that, the offense really did struggle. Carson had 8 carries at 41 yards, 5.1 average in that touchdown. That was amazing. But other than that, those two, the Chris Carson for 41 yards and Metcalf for 177 yards, that was the offense. And everything else was just kind of really scattered and not very productive overall. And it was concerning. I mean, the Eagles are legit pretty decent defense. You put that,
they are.
You put that defense with a team that has a pretty stellar offense, and that team is definitely very competitive.
Yeah, that is why we walked into this year thinking the Eagles were going to be a playoff team, that they were going to win the NFC East, and they were going to be a good team because the defense was going to be good, and you didn't expect Carson Wentz to regress to being just terrible. And if he was back at the place he was, before his last injury, that's a decent football team. But they're getting so little from their quarterback position that it's hurting everywhere else.
Well, it's the offensive line. That offensive line was really bad, dude.
Oh, it was. But he's also been bad. There were times he had time and just missed. He just could not complete a pass.
But he's not, he's got some legs to him, and he has been more athletic in the past before some injuries have kind of taken a toll. But he's not without skill. Mm-hmm. But that offensive line has really got him skittish and indecisive, and it's a very difficult situation there, and they're not scheming for him to be successful there. They haven't really changed anything, so they keep looking for the same plays, and they're just not available.
Well, and the defense, despite the offense being bad and turning the ball over a lot, the defense has still been good, and I think that says a lot about the talent on defense. So the Seahawks moved the ball pretty well in this game, put up 23 points. I would have liked to see them put up significantly more because they left a lot of points on the field. But
that they did.
To put up 23 points against a good defensive team isn't bad. The fact that they cost themselves anywhere from 7 to 21 points with nonsense is
Well, let's talk about that nonsense. So,
so.
let's talk about the 2 fourth down attempts that we flailed on. I
Mhm.
thought they were one of the worst play calls. Well, both of them were kind of horrendously executed. But the first one there at the goal line with the David Moore, end around thing, I just thought was bizarre. I mean, you
Yeah, I
got
mean,
Chris Carson, you
you
got
got
Russell
first and goal
Wilson,
at the 6, you got second and goal at the 3 or 2.5, and then you can't get in. And you've got Carson that can pound the ball and is one of the hardest guys to tackle in the league. And then you've got Wilson and his scrambling ability and throwing ability, and you've got guys like Metcalf and Moore that are tall, and Cody Parkinson's out there now, and so they could totally go some sort of play design for any of those guys. And instead they try to do an end around, but not even a real end around, where it's like a shovel pass end around where Moore is running in front of Wilson, and then it's supposed to be a trick play where he then pulls out and goes to the other direction. And it looks like they're running a read option, and nobody was fooled. Nobody. It was just you want
well,
to talk
and
about
Metcalf
getting
missed his
cute.
block, and they got underneath that and blew up the play, and that's that. I mean,
It wasn't
if
just Metcalf. It
Metcalf
wasn't
makes
just
that block,
there were two
they
guys. There were
probably
two
score.
guys there
Yeah, but they were
that were
more
hitting him
outside. I think.
the moment he got the ball. He was getting like he was dealing with people. It was
Oh, it
just
was poor. I mean,
it was terrible.
it was a poor play call and poorly executed. So the 1-2 punch of not being able to execute that cost us points. I mean, we were right there. We should have scored. At the very least, you kick a field goal and you just take the points. And we walked away with nothing there. And then the second time it was, we were further out, 30, 37, 40-yard line, something like that. And
I don't mind the team going for it in
I
that
don't mind
situation
the team
because
going forward in that situation either,
that's the
especially
perfect
the way our
situation to
defense
go
has
for
been
it.
playing.
That's the perfect situation to go for it. You're just outside of field goal range. If you punt it, you likely only get 20 yards of field position because it's hard to pin them deep from there and not have it go into the end zone. Go for it. To me, that's the perfect situation to do it, and they just screwed it up.
Well, they had to call timeout. It's weird, and this this is a professional football team, coached by professionals, led by one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and the lack of execution on these things, the lack of acuity as far as knowing the time, knowing what you're going to run in that situation, already having these plays queued up, in this situation, we're going to run this play. And this is why, and they can't get the play call in. And then Russell Wilson's clamoring around, and it just looks completely dysfunctional on one of the best offenses in the NFL. And against an inferior opponent, you can't do that. I mean, you've got to be able to pound these guys and put these guys out, by the first or second series in the third quarter. The game should be over. And in theory, it probably was, but it ended up being way closer than it should have been. And you can point back directly to those two play calls as being, an impact as far as how many points we were able to put on the board ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't mind the second one. I think it was the right.
I don't mind them going for it on the first one as long as the play call is correct.
Yeah, I mean that play call was bad because I mean think about it. It's 4th and goal at the 3, and you're going to run an end around.
Yeah, that's weird.
How about you actually just run something?
We don't even run that very well in the open field at the 50.
Yeah,
half the time. We get blown. A lot of plays that we call have been getting blown up lately, and I don't. It almost seems like the defense kind of knows what we're doing.
And I don't understand why you run that to David Moore anyway. Why do you if you're gonna run an end around?
Injured,
you got Tyler Lockett. I mean,
well, let me ask you this:
he's on your team. Use him.
Let's talk about David Moore. Like, what's going on with David Moore? Like, is he injured, or like what's happening in the return game? Like, there was a time, Keith, where he received the ball on a punt, and he had 20 yards in front of him, and he stood like a statue with his feet glued to the ground, examining the field as players are rushing towards him, closing in, and then he scampers around for like a 3-yard gain. He did that a couple different times back there, and I thought, and then they put DJ Reed in there and it improved. But
Yeah.
what is going on there with David?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on with him. He also, if you look back at early in the year when the team's offense was really clicking, David Moore had a big role in all of that. And I think a lot of it was that teams were focusing so heavy on, on Metcalf and Lockett that you can only defend so many guys. And it was like, hey, David Moore is like having this breakout year and doing really well. And then suddenly you have, he's just not showing up on game day that much. And the offense is struggling more. And I think whatever regression we're seeing with him is part of what's going on with the offense. Now, I don't know if it's the offensive regression causing his numbers to go down or the other way around. I think they're probably both related. But I mean, he had a touchdown in this one, so I don't want to say, oh, he didn't show up at all. But he just hasn't been performing at the same level he was earlier in the year.
So let me throw this little fun stat at you. David Moore set an NFL record for the fewest yards received in a game with a receiving touchdown included at -6. So he had -6 yards. He managed to score a touchdown on however many receptions, 4 receptions or whatever for -6 yards. And then you had the returning kind of stuff going on that's less than optimal. And I'm not sure exactly what you do with David Moore there, and Swain, it's not like he didn't play. He didn't get any targets. So Swain was in there for 20 snaps, didn't get any targets at all. So he just kind of ran through the plays and wasn't targeted. So,
well, the defense, you got to give the defense credit. That is a good defense. It's a talented defense.
Yeah.
They got Graham up front, matched up against Abuhi, and that's not a good matchup for Seattle. It's one of their strengths against one of Seattle's weaknesses, and it caused Seattle a lot of problems. And you have give credit to the defense because they've earned it. Like they played well enough in this game. They did their part. The Seahawks defense also did their part, and then it came down. So it came down to which offense, and Seattle's got the better offense of the two, and that's why Seattle won. But the Eagles' defense slowed Seattle down, and they played well, which is why that happened. It's not just, Seattle stopped themselves.
Well, let's talk about Seattle's defense. Talk about a unit that's actually playing really well. And it was going to be a long night when Carson Wentz on their very first drive of the evening, their best play was a hard count. They ended up, Seattle ended the first quarter with 0 first downs and -4 yards, the Eagles did. And Seattle defense forced 5 straight 3-and-outs to start the game, led 14-0, looked like it was going to be a blowout. They continued to play pretty well throughout the game. I mean, obviously they gave up that little thing at the end, but overall
they started giving up giving a lot more yards in the second half. They really
allowed 301 total yards of offense, 225 yards passing.
Okay, but
do the math. Of that was in garbage time. And
do the math there, though.
Which is great.
300 and some total yards, and they had, what was it, 6 at halftime? So you're talking about basically 300 yards of offense in a half to a bad offensive team.
Yeah, but Carson Wentz completed only 2 passes thrown to targets beyond the line of scrimmage in the first half. He was 2 of 10, 5 of 7.
I'm not talking about the first half, though.
I know.
I'm talking about the second half when they gave up 300 yards of offense to a bad offensive team.
Seattle had 2 key 4th down stops in the 4th quarter, Keith. KJ Wright passed, with the pass batted down on 4th down, and Quandre Diggs with the interception on 4th down. I mean, you got to give Seattle credit here. I mean, I think you put the whole onus of the bad play, quote unquote, in this game on the offense. The defense, to me, played well.
They showed up and played well in the first half. And they played well the last, other than the Hail Mary play, they played well, for the last couple of possessions.
They had 6 or 7 sacks and pressure throughout. And I thought it was one of the most consistent plays of the entire game.
All of that came in the first half. That's my problem. Is the Eagles in the second half were able to drive down the field. They got field goals, but they drove the length of the field. over and over again. And I think that the score masks
They
some
didn't
of
have that many yards, Keith.
They had 300 yards in the half.
Yeah.
That's a 600-yard game.
But nonetheless, I mean, you got to look at the game as a whole. I mean, we put them out. They were not in this game. They had no chance of winning this game. And I just think that you got to give Seattle credit for that. I mean, they took them out of the game. They played well enough to beat this team in a half.
They played well in the first half. They did not play well in the second half. And I don't think that it is honest
I honestly blame the offense for that.
You blame the offense for the defense giving up 300 yards.
Yeah, because the offense couldn't sustain any drives and help that defense out a little bit.
Because in the second half, right, start of the third quarter, 12 plays. It would have been a
completely different thing if we would have scored those 14 points. We probably should have scored.
12 plays, 48 yards.
This thing would have been 37.
And a field goal.
This thing
7 plays, 25 yards, turnover on downs.
This thing would have been 35 points to 17, and you wouldn't have
7
had
plays, 23
complaint.
yards, interception. 7 plays, 12 yards because of a bunch of penalties, turnover on downs. 4 plays, 58 yards. I mean, they were able to move the ball.
Empty yards. Empty.
15 plays, 70 yards, and a touchdown.
You take out the Hail Mary, they scored 9 points in this game. Come on.
They still put up 300 yards and a half.
And 9 points. Plus the Hail Mary. Come on.
Plus they put up 300 yards and a half. Let's not say it was great. It was great in the first half.
Let's talk about players.
In the second half, they struggled. They gave up 300 yards against a bad offensive team and a quarterback that he's incredibly inaccurate and struggles to complete any passes. They still gave up 300 yards. You put any quarterback in the league not named Carson Wentz in there, and this
the situation.
No, I think you have to evaluate what actually happened.
In the context of the situation, we were up big, and they went into a zone scheme defense that gave up yardage in the middle, and we didn't give anything really over the top, and
they gave up a ton of yardage and only were able to keep the score down because Carson Wentz is terrible.
Yeah.
This isn't any different than at the end of the 49ers game when Nick Mullins came in and put up a ton of yards.
We won this game, and we won this game pretty convincingly. And it would have been more convincing had we made the fourth down conversion to score in the first quarter, and the fourth down conversion inside their territory a little bit later. It would have just changed completely the complexity of this game. So I'm not going to be that hard on the defense. I thought they looked improved. I thought the pass rush was amazing. I thought Jamal Adams probably had one of his best games. You know, Poona Ford had one of his best games. Rasheem Green, Carlos Dunlap, LJ Collier all played very well. Quandre Diggs again played well. DK Metcalf had his best yardage game as a pro. Overall, I thought the team played excellent, and I'm not going to micro analyze how many yards they gave up. They were empty yards. They didn't score a ton of points. Seattle had its best scoring defensive game of the year, and allowing 17 points, and yardage wise, one of the best yardage games given up in the year. I mean, you can't complain just because it all came in 2 quarters. I mean, that's just the nature of football.
No, it's not. This is a team that played really good for a half, and then honestly, they did what they needed to do to let the Eagles back into it in the second half, and gave up 300 yards of offense in a half, gave up 11 points, it's 14 points in the second half. And they did so against a terrible offensive team.
Yeah, they took the gas off. There's no question.
And
they did the same thing on offense. They took the gas off. I was
unimpressed and the thing is
with the way that they played in the second half of this game.
You want me to be impressed with the defense? Don't let terrible offenses move the ball up and down on you the way the Eagles did. I love what they did in the first half. In the second half, they were mediocre at best. And I think that because it's not, you're like, oh, well, they only gave up so many points. Against a terrible team, they only gave up so many points. They still gave up all those yards to a terrible team. That's the context that I think we need to keep in mind.
They are terrible in a sense, but they've played really well against teams throughout the year. If you take a look at all their games, who they've played, the scores of those games, this is a very similar type game that they've played other teams too. Their defense is disruptive, causes issues, and their offense is not completely horrible. Statistically, they're not.
It's bad.
Statistically, overall in the NFL, they're a mediocre team. They're not the bottom of the barrel offense.
No, they're not the Jets, but they're still bad.
Yeah, I'll totally give you that. They don't have any weapons. I mean, we shut down their running game. They were one-dimensional, and we pass rushed them and got to Wentz. You mentioned that it mostly came in the first half. I mean, they had 4 sacks in the first half and a couple in the second half.
Once Dunlap got hurt, their pass rush
in the third quarter, right?
That's when the pass rush disappeared.
Right.
And then I think they had one more sack after that, and it was
but they were certainly only rushing
blitz,
3 and 4 guys at that point. They weren't blitzing or anything like that. So, speaking of blitzing, Jamal Adams, 2 quarterback hits, a tackle for loss, 9 tackles overall, a sack versus the Eagles, 6.5 sacks on the year. Having him back is a big deal. In the combination with Dunlap, that combo really has made a huge difference for the defense.
Absolutely, it has.
I just don't know what's going on with Dunlap later.
Last year, who led the Seahawks in sacks and how many? Do you remember?
It was Rasheem Green at 4.
Rasheem Green at 4.
Yeah.
So Adams missed 4 games to injury. He's already got 6.5.
I know.
You want to tell me that's not significant?
He's going to end the season with double-digit sacks, and Dunlap is going to get close. I mean, if Dunlap is
if he's healthy,
be back in,
If this foot thing's not a big deal, he's probably going to get close. And he moved in almost all of that in a Seahawk uniform because he did essentially nothing for the Bengals.
So speaking of Jamal Adams, so before the season started, we were trying to figure out how Seattle would use him. We had mentioned that the Jets had used him kind of all over the place. And I saw a stat come up on the screen on Monday Night Football, and I took a snapshot of it because I thought it was really interesting. Seattle has used him in very similar the Jets have used him, including blitzing and all that kind of stuff. And we just didn't know if that would happen because it's out of character for Seattle to do that. But they've used him at safety, 154 snaps. Outside linebacker, I found this very interesting, 153 snaps. This is coming into the Monday night game. Slot corner, 84 snaps. Middle linebacker, 24 snaps. Outside cornerback, 13 snaps. So between the safety and the outside linebacker, which is where I think that he should play almost full time as outside linebacker, I thought that was an interesting insight to the way that they use him in this scheme. And I think that points to some of the weirdness that we were seeing early on in this season, where they were having a hard time communicating and stuff, is because he was just getting moved around all over the place.
Yeah, and I do think that you could see some of what the Seahawks were doing, because it's not just that, he's the safety out there, and because of the personnel and the motion and the formation, he ends up at corner. No, they lined him up out there. And when they did so, they would bring in other guys. I mean, you saw, even in the opening game of the season, you saw Leno Hill get snaps because they needed, right? They had the way they moved people around, and Blair was the nickel corner, and they wanted to use Adams in a different way. So they would line him up at outside linebacker. They would actually bring Leno Hill in to be an extra safety, and they had technically 4 safeties on the field, with Adams being assigned the outside linebacker role. It's not just what he ended up doing on the play. This is conscious. This is a conscious effort. This is the way the personnel groups are. You see Ryan Neal, his backup, get snaps in every game, not because Adams goes out, but because Adams is playing a different position, and they need a strong safety. So they have no problem bringing in another strong safety to let Adams go be an outside linebacker for a couple plays.
Right. And I
be
noticed
a slot
Jordan
corner.
Brooks snaps. I've got him. Hold on just a sec. Jordan Brooks was at, trying to figure this out. He only took 21 snaps, 30% out there at strong side linebacker.
Mm-hmm. They played a lot of nickel in this game.
Yeah.
In part because they got up.
Yeah.
Need to worry about Sanders running on them.
So let's talk about some more players. So Bobby Wagner, third player since the 2000 to record 9 straight 100 tackle seasons, with Fletcher, London Fletcher, and Keith Brooking being the other guy. Pro Football Focus's highest graded run defender in the NFL at 90.8 overall. So he's having another great season. This game, though, he only had 3 tackles, which I found kind of interesting.
Which I found really interesting, too. Because
that's one of his lowest marks that I've seen. That's
probably the lowest mark of his career. Because Bobby Wagner is a tackling machine, especially against the run. But that's part of it, is how many running plays did the Eagles call?
Well, Jamal Adams ended up with 9 tackles, which is interesting to me.
Wagner has, as he's aged, he is still the best run defender in the NFL. He's no longer the elite pass defender in coverage he used to be. He's lost his step, right? I mean, at one point he was arguably the fastest linebacker in the NFL, and he's not that anymore. He's still awesome. I'm not saying
nice coverage against Goddard down there.
He did downfield.
Yeah,
made a great play on that. But it's not the strength it used to be for him. And so if the other teams are throwing the ball a lot and they aren't throwing it into the middle on crossing routes where he can make tackles, he's not going to get as many tackles, because if teams want to run the ball, he's going to get a lot of tackles. And
he's over 100 now. So
yeah, 9 straight seasons.
Poona Ford, 3 quarterback hits and a sack. This guy continues to play with a penetrating defensive tackle mentality. And they're doing that with him on purpose. Stretching him out a little bit more this year than in the past. What's the difference that they see?
They're playing him at 3 tech with Snacks Harrison beside him. And they did that a little bit right before.
I noticed they were playing Jerron Reed at defensive end a couple times.
Yeah, and they had Collier in a defensive tackle at times too. They were moving the guys around, and I think that has something to do with it. You end up with Poona Ford in the past has always been the 1 tech. His job is to eat blocks, take on 2 guys, and clog up that middle. And this year, especially since Snacks Harrison, joined them, but even before that, because with Monet as being the 3rd one, those 2 guys are. That's what they do, right? They eat blocks, they take up space in the middle, and if you've got multiple guys like that on the inside, somebody has to actually try and penetrate and be disruptive. And they're letting Poona Ford do that because the other 2 guys aren't that. And he is stepping up and doing what Jerron Reed did 2 years ago when he had 10.5 sacks.
He was always in the backfield too. I mean, he blows stuff up, tackles for loss, etc. He's having a great season. Great season. I mean, he's got to be in a Pro Bowl conversation somewhere. Rasheem Green came back. He had a few snaps the week prior, but this week I thought he had a real nice present, had a real nice timely sack in the backfield. I almost thought it was Carlos Dunlap at first, and then it was Rasheem Green. I was like, wow, that guy seriously got to the quarterback. Carlos Dunlap had a half sack in this game, 4 sacks in 3 games overall. In the weeks prior to Dunlap's arrival, 12 sacks in 7 games. Before Dunlap, 19 sacks in 4 games since. Obviously, the guy, along with Adams, I think, is making a huge difference. And if we lose that guy for any time, it's going to be brutal.
So the Seahawks went from being last in the NFL in terms of sacks. They traded for Dunlap, And since they traded for Dunlap in the week since then, they have more sacks than any NFL team.
Yeah, and who knows where they're going to be ranked after this week? I mean, it's yet another 6 to that. It's the total
saying,
is
like,
starting to.
They were the worst team before him. They've been the best team at getting sacks since him. That is there's a correlation
we've
there.
Won 2 in a row, and yeah, we seem to be on a roll. We're putting it together on the defensive side now. If the offense can come back to the first 5 or 6 games, that rate of efficiency, this team is going to be hard to stop, and we need to figure that out on offense. Let's talk about offensive players a little bit. DK Metcalf.
Oh man, he's over 1,000 yards. He is now the NFL's leading receiver.
Yeah.
First 1,000-yard receiver for the Seahawks since, I believe, Bobby Ingram.
Also the fastest player in franchise history to get to 1,000 yards in 11 games, which is remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Joey Galloway. When he was the guy, you've got guys like Jackson when he was in Holmgren's pass first offense. And, of course,
Darrell Jackson took 13 games in 2004 to get to 1,000 yards. And then prior to that, it was Largent, I think in 89 or something like that, 13 games. So DK Metcalf's just a specimen, though. It's interesting because it's so much fun to watch this guy evolve and to look at how the NFL is looking at him, and other fans and stuff. I went out on just to see, and some of the reaction to the Jim Schwartz comment about Megatron, and he's not quite there yet. To DK before the game, and DK said, "I play with a chip on my shoulder." That really pissed me off. And some of the other comments that were out there in the blogosphere today were just hilarious. I mean, other fans are just like, "This dude is Terminator. Like he's not only Terminator, he plays like one. And he's fast, and everyone's just envious of this guy and can't believe he got passed on in the draft. And it looks like we've got the next greatest wide receiver in a Seahawks uniform in DK Metcalf. It's just crazy.
The one thing he needs to work on right now is catching the ball. The drops are killing me.
Yeah. Well, because he's already had 3 drop touchdowns this year.
He had that brilliant, throw and catch on the outside, that like outside fade on the left side, where Slay was all over him in perfect coverage,
and muscled that ball.
And you just can't cover that. You can't cover that level of greatness. And then on like 2 plays later, ball hits him in the hands in the end zone, and he dropped it. And it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. And usually it's over the middle in traffic and stuff. He just loses track of the ball or loses focus just for a second. And that's, and hopefully in time those things improve. If not, he's still all pro level wide receiver. You realize though that he's just got that little extra more. I mean, he's leaving stuff out on the field to the point where you just know that if he completed those things, and we don't want him to be perfect, but if he just had another couple catches a game that were those really key moment catches and touchdowns and stuff, this guy would just be off the charts. Unbelievable.
If he cuts the drops that he has in half, I mean, he's already the league's leading receiver, and all of that. But you cut the drops in half, and you're talking Randy Moss historic production.
Absolutely, and he might get there anyway.
Yeah,
when you add the touchdown drops, and he's got 9 now. He could have 12. You add some of the yardage, he could have probably another 70 some odd yards, or not 70, probably a couple 100 yards in addition to what he's already got in 10, 11 games. It's just crazy. All right, Russell Wilson, best career win percentage for a quarterback in prime time, continues to build on that. 0.776 overall, 29, 8-1. Better now than Steve Young, Ken Stabler, and Joe Montana. What I found interesting about all those names, those are all West Coast guys. Steve Young and Joe Montana for the 49ers, Ken Stabler, the Snake from the Oakland Raiders back in the day in the 70s, and now Russell Wilson for the Seahawks.
So
that is interesting.
Well, it's not. It's Monday night and Sunday night. So primetime, non-Thursday games because Thursdays are screwy with the short week and everything. But Sunday and Monday of West Coast teams playing in Eastern time zone. The West Coast team has won 14 in a row.
Wow.
That is not just a statistical anomaly. What you end up seeing is that the NFL loves their East Coast teams because of the big markets and their population density and all of that. You end up getting a lot of mediocre NFC East teams like Dallas and the Giants and
Washington.
Philly
Yep.
hosting Monday night football games when they're not that good. And the teams they end up playing against are the teams that are the best of the best, like Seattle.
Seattle,
and
San Francisco, et cetera, right?
Yeah, and so you end up with a lot of games that are for scheduling purposes and in the attempt to get ratings to be really good West Coast teams against middling East Coast teams on Monday Night Football. And yeah, it helps Wilson build up a record like that. It also helps, that 14-0 record on Monday Night Football for West Coast teams. So it's one of those things that we see all the time, and it used to bug me so much as a fan of a West Coast team. Like, they just don't get the respect of the East Coast teams, and they never get to host to these games. They always have to travel for them. It doesn't bother me as much anymore because traveling for them doesn't make it worse. It actually they're going to go get a win on prime time. And so, but it used to really bother me, and I just have kind of gotten old. And
well, since Seattle's really started winning since in the Pete Carroll era, I think things have equaled out, overall. So another stat for Wilson, joins Peyton Manning as the second quarterback ever with 3,000 passing yards in each of his first 9 seasons. So he's continuing to build up the winningest record overall for any quarterback in the first 9 seasons, but he has now reached 3,000 yards passing in the first 9 seasons of each of those seasons. Only the second quarterback ever. At
this point, do we just
these
start
things are
saying
going to keep these records that we're going to announce periodically? They're just going to keep stacking up.
At what point do we start just saying future Hall of Famer Russell Wilson?
Well, yeah,
because the fact that he's the most wins by age blank or in year blank of quarterback, he's always been the leader of that. All the primetime winning percentage, just overall winning percentage, most seasons with yards, most seasons with a passer rating over
touchdowns.
Pick a random number.
Yeah,
30, highest
over 30 touchdowns in a season. I think it's his 4th or 5th season in a row or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and you look at touchdown interception ratio, he's always amongst the best, and it's just
all-time quarterback rating right there.
Pick a stat, any of them, he's in the top 2 or 3 ever.
So let me ask you this. So when he came out, one of his very first interviews that he gave after being drafted by the Seattle Seahawks asked him about where he saw himself, what he wanted to do, what he wanted to be. And he said that he wanted to be considered to be one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. And he's maintained that sort of line as one of his kind of go-to lines as being great and so forth throughout his tenure as a quarterback for the Seahawks. And now he's actually realizing some of that. And it just must be amazing for him to realize that he's fulfilled those sorts of goals for himself.
What would he have to do at this point not to make it to the Hall of Fame?
Probably nothing. I think that if he left the game after this year and walked away, he would be in the Hall of Fame.
Because think about what he's done before he was drafted. If you were
back in the day too, 9 seasons as a quarterback, it would have been it for most guys.
But if you think about, look, when he was drafted, everyone was like, he's too short, he's too short. Since he's been drafted, look at how many short quarterbacks have gotten drafted.
Yeah.
Right? Kyler Murray. Let's just go with that. Who's With
Deshaun
number one
Watson,
overall
Kyler Murray,
pick,
et
and
cetera, right?
there's just been a bunch of short quarterbacks that go. You look at what he did as a scrambler and as a running quarterback, and as the team embraced his ability to extend plays.
He's the fourth leading rushing quarterback of all time. And he's still
got a ways to go.
He's probably got another at least 6 years where he can run legit.
So you say that, and I'm like, ooh, who are the top three? Steve Young, Mike Vick, and
Culpepper? No.
Cam Newton.
Who was the guy in Cam Newton. And who
or
was
it could have been Steve McNair.
Who was the guy that played for the Eagles? Just up until like 10 years ago. He was their main guy.
Oh, jeez.
You know who I'm talking about, right? Cunningham?
I do. I know exactly. I can picture
Randall Cunningham. Is it Randall Cunningham?
No, that was years before.
Anyway, I can't remember right off the top of my head right now. But yeah, I mean, he's up there. And when you add that to his passing acumen, he's got to be considered one of the top 5 quarterbacks of all time. Right now.
You can look at everything from fourth quarter comebacks or game-winning drives. You can look at, just any
he's a Super Bowl winner. He's been in another Super Bowl that he probably should have won. He's hopefully get to a few more. And I think if he does that, I mean, there's just no question, right? There's no question right now, but there's just no question that you can't put a 2 or 3 or 4 time Super Bowl guy into the Hall of Fame. It'll be interesting to see how this thing all finishes out with Pete Carroll and that marriage together, and this current group of players that they're kind of building together. It'll be interesting to see if they can get there and get it done this year, because this is definitely a opportunity right now in this moment that you want to take advantage of for him. Because these things just don't come along. I mean, we've seen it. Seattle's been good and consistent for a long time, but you only get to that pinnacle of the Super Bowl like 2, 3, 4 times, maybe, if you're lucky. Even if you're Russell Wilson, you know what I mean? It's like that's a very difficult place to get to. So Jason Myers, 24th straight field goal, second longest streak in franchise history. He continues to be very impressive. He's still not even considered to be a Pro Bowl type kicker, just because the opportunities haven't been there for him this year.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't early on. They were 5 games in before he hit his third.
Well, that's because we scored touchdowns in the red zone. Yeah,
but since then they've kicked more field goals, and he's made them. And that 61-yarder is going to take. He's going to get noticed for that. That was phenomenal, but. Oddly, with Jason Myers, perfect for field goals, including a 61-yarder. He's missed 2 extra points.
Yeah, but we score a lot. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
I mean, this is a guy living up to his last name, right? He makes the hard ones look easy, and he makes the easy ones look hard.
So one more player.
That's a Myers trade if there ever was one.
One more player I wanted to talk about before we exit this segment and move on to the Giants game. Cedric Abuahe played right tackle. Brandon Shell is out. It really showed in this game. Pro Football Focus graded 36.1 for Cedric Abuahe, and he just looked really bad the whole time out there. And it kind of made Damian Lewis look bad. The interior of the line just kind of tried to compensate, I think, a little bit for that guy out there, and just didn't work. Everything was a little discombobulated. Russell Wilson only got sacked a couple times, but the run blocking really wasn't there for anybody other than Chris Carson, and Chris Carson did it by himself. And then the rest of the yards per carry was pathetic, for the most part in this game.
Even Carlos Hyde only averaged like 1.5 yards per carry.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And then the pass blocking was just atrocious most of the game. So, but I got to give the Eagles credit. They've got a great line. In fact, they led the league before this game in sack percentage and so forth. So they get it done on that defensive line. All right. So that was a win. Now we move on. Seattle's 8-3, first in the NFC West. We face the first in the NFC East, 4-7 New York Giants come to Lumen Field in Seattle. The Giants started 0-5 this year. I mean, they were like going to be the downtrodden team in the NFC East, along with the Jets. Like they were going to battle like who was going to get the first pick in the NFL draft. Joe Judge, their head coach, prior to that, he'd spent a long time with the New England Patriots, so he's got a good background there. Offensive coordinator Jason Garrett. They had their quarterback, their 4th overall pick in the 2019 draft, Daniel Jones. They had Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley tore his ACL in week 2. Daniel Jones has been struggling a little bit. Their offensive line protections have been questionable, even though they've got a really nice player that they picked up in the draft, in Andrew Thomas, overall, fourth pick overall in the 2020 draft. But they ended up picking wins up against the Washington Football Club twice, the Eagles and the Bengals. So it's not a murderer's row of teams by any stretch of the imagination. And they ended up with a 3-1 record in the month of November. So all of a sudden, this team's feeling pretty good about itself, even though they've beaten some, quite frankly, inferior kind of competition. But their next 4 games is the test for those guys. They got the Seahawks, the Cardinals, the Browns, and the Ravens, all playoff caliber teams, and it's an uphill battle for them, and they're on the road. And Daniel Jones is going to probably be out this week with a strained hamstring. They're going to look to a new quarterback,
Colt McCoy,
that we are vaguely familiar with here in the Northwest.
It's hard to call him a new quarterback. Isn't he like 74 years old?
He hasn't won a start in the NFL since 2014. I kid you not. And he only has, believe this or not, Colt McCoy has been around, kicked around a long time. He's got some injuries, history, all that kind of stuff. He's 7-21 overall win-loss record in the NFL. And now obviously mostly as a backup guy. So I don't feel I don't feel sorry for this team at all, but they're not in a really good position to continue their 3-1 win streak. They've won 3 in a row into this game.
Yeah. This is, I believe, the 3rd game in a row where the Seahawks have faced a division winner or division leader.
Wow. That's crazy. And we're 2-0.
Yeah, because there's Arizona, who at the time led the division, but they haven't won since. They're now in 3rd. And then the Eagles and Giants have both share a lead in the same division, right? But they're both bad. So it sounds really impressive to say that a 3rd straight game against a division leader, but when 2 of them are the Eagles and the Giants, it's just not as impressive.
Well, the interesting thing about the Giants is 6 of the last 7 games for the Giants have been decided by 3 or less points. Which makes this team slightly scary. More so with Daniel Jones. He's not in there. Colt McCoy, who knows what we're going to get. We've seen that in the past, though. He's wildly erratic and gets rattled by pressure, all that kind of stuff. So,
the Seahawks are going to come after him.
Yeah, and no doubt. And so, but what do you do with that? 6 of the last 7 games decided by 3 points or less. So they are playing their teams.
But who are they playing?
Equally. I'd have to go back out. I can't remember.
What division do they play in?
Yeah, I know.
The worst division in football. And then you throw in the fact that
they face a pretty easy schedule because they're facing their toughest schedule right now.
Yeah. They've played a lot of division games already, which helps them look good because that division's awful. You play against teams like the Bengals, who are bad.
Washington twice.
It's you end up.
Jets.
This isn't
a good football team.
It's not a good football team.
Yeah,
and
these guys
here's the thing:
as bad or worse than the Eagles.
But what they are is well coached. And whether people want to say this or not, they don't know Joe Judge and what's going on there. If you watch the games, those guys play hard. Mm-hmm. They play disciplined football. They play hard.
Their defense is actually really pretty good.
Their defense is pretty good. They're really disciplined, and they just don't have a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Without Saquon and now without their quarterback, they just don't have a lot of talent.
Well, they've got Evan Ingram at tight end, Golden Tate, wide receiver. He's got 28 receptions, 306 yards, no touchdowns. So he's not their biggest guy. Their biggest guy that they throw to now is Darius Slayton, 6'1" speedster guy, 38 receptions, 584 yards, 15.4 average, 3 touchdowns. So he's
there's
kind of
nothing
gets down the
about
field.
there's nothing about Colt McCoy that says throw it deep.
True.
Guy's got
underneath
a noodle
though.
arm.
He's got Ingram and he's got Gallman. So Wayne Gallman's their running back. They like to run the ball,
and he's got Golden Tate, who they can hit on a short pass
then
have him make people miss once he gets the ball on his
they'll hit the tight end, they'll hit the running back out of the backfield, and that's their offense. They're not going to throw the ball. They're going to dink and dunk. Colt McCoy is not going to sit back there and try to launch the ball.
I want him to try.
Arm too. Yeah,
I want him to try.
The arm. He never had the arm. Never had the arm. He's got bad knees.
Yep.
And
noodle arm and bad knees. That sounds like a great player to blitz.
It's not a great combo, but he's a pro, so he knows what he's supposed to be doing out there. So if they can dink and dunk, that's their best option is to try to keep Russell Wilson off the field, take some of the clock down, and try to score against an improving Seattle Seahawks defense against their offensive line, which is questionable at best. So we'll see how that goes. On their defensive side, they've got Logan Ryan at corner, free safety. He's really nice. Blake Martinez at linebacker. He's a really decent player. Jabril Peppers at safety. Leonard Williams at defensive end, still pretty decent at a kind of a 5-tech based defensive end. 36 tackles, 6 sacks this year. Dexter Lawrence. Dalvin Tomlinson's in there as kind of a run stuffing defensive tackle. That's it for them. That's it. That's all they got. They're not a big name defense.
No, but it's a good disciplined defense.
It is.
And
but against the guy, at some point, Seattle's got to get back to being the Russell Wilson of the first 5 or 6 games. And if he shows up, this game's over. Over. Yeah, because they can't play from behind.
They can't play from behind. They're not going to keep up with Seattle. Seattle's offense, even if Russell only plays the way he has over the last 4 games, like they're still not going to keep up with Seattle. Seattle's just got more talent.
Yeah, and their defense is showing up. So, even without Dunlap in this game, I think that they can get some pass rush, and I think that's improved now.
Well, having Adams back and able to come off the edge or come up the middle, and they'll blitz Wagner if they need to, and they'll find ways to get some pressure. And you're talking about a guy who was never particularly mobile, and now he's got 2 bad knees, and it's a statue. And they're gonna get after him. He's not gonna beat you with his feet. He's got to throw the ball. He's got to get it out. So you play everyone up tight and in press, and you blitz him hard. And trust me, it'll work. Yeah. I don't see
even rushing 4. I don't even know if you have to blitz him terribly. I think pressure with him is enough. You don't have to necessarily sack him to affect Colt McCoy. Colt McCoy is going to get rattled, A, because he hasn't played for a while, and B, because he's not good at pressure, at evaluating pressure and diagnosing it and getting and checking down and so forth are not his things. He just never has been an NFL caliber guy. I think what was he in a first round guy at the time? Like we're talking.
No, he was
right.
He was thought of as one, but then he dropped.
That's right. Yeah, interesting. I see this as being one of those games where Seattle finally pulls it all together on offense and scores 30 plus points again, and the defense shuts these guys down. These guys aren't a high scoring offense anyway, and so it's probably going to be 35, 20, 20, something like that.
Yep, I do think that. And so everyone just assumed that he's a nobody. But there have been special teams coaches, if they can get the locker room, which is the reason why they're not hired, is it's hard for them to get the locker room, and they tend to keep it, and they tend to be really good. And Harbaugh in Baltimore is a great example. He was a special teams coach before becoming a head coach, and they're used to speaking to the entire team. They are meticulously organized. It's their job. They have to manage whole rosters because of running special teams. I would like to see more teams go the special teams coach route when hiring. It it works better than people think. And Judge has got these guys playing hard. They're playing disciplined. They're just not good.
Yeah, they need more talent. They have
need
talent deficits all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing as disciplined as they're playing. If they had real at some more positions, they'd be a good team. They just don't have the talent, and that's not his fault. He's just the coach. He's not the GM. So, in case you can't tell, I've been a fan of the work he's done this year. I think he's done a fantastic job with the team that really should be in the top 2 or 3 picks.
And they may end up getting there because they've got Murderers Row coming up.
They also might win their division because the division's terrible.
That is hard to predict. I mean, with the Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, Ravens, they're going to lose those 4 games.
Yeah.
So they're going to be 4-11 by the time they're done with that. And if that's going to get you a division, hats off.
Well, so that division's going to win enough. I mean, you're looking at a division winner that's probably going to.
I think it's going to end up being Washington. Not completely honest with you. I think Washington's going to emerge
at 5 or 6 wins.
Yeah, but they're the better team right now. I think they're the better coach team. They're the better quarterbacked team, and I think in the end that makes a difference.
Yeah, I would have said it was the Giants until they lost their quarterback. And now that it's Colt McCoy, I'm like, I don't know. I thought it was going to be Dallas until Dak got hurt.
Equally inept. I mean,
oh God, they're just awful.
I know.
That's such an awful division.
What's your prediction? Then let's get out of here.
Oh, I'm going to go like 31-13 Seattle. I really don't think they're going to have any chance to keep up.
So if we do 13 points allowed, that'll be the 3rd or the 4th week in a row that our point total allowed has dropped to the season best mark.
Mm-hmm.
That would be nice. I'd like to see that.
I want to see them keep the opposing team under 300 yards of total offense.
I would like them to put away teams and not play down to their level.
Okay, now you're just asking for like miracles.
It's got to happen one of these weeks, right?
One of these months. Yeah, we'll see.
So how are we doing on predictions? We didn't do very well this last game. We predicted a loss against the Eagles when
So if you go back preseason, we thought the Eagles were going to be better than they have been. We thought that we knew the defense was going to be good, and it has been. It's been better than I think it is. It looks statistically because the offense has been so bad. But we really did not expect Carson Wentz to regress like that. So you and I both thought they were going to be a 9 or 10 win team and win that division, and we both had it as a loss. No, it was a win. But overall, where are we at? Do you have that?
Well, I don't have the season total. I mean, we're 8-3. I think that I was real close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8. Yeah. So at this point I had them predicted to be 8, and they are at 8. But I think I had them at 7. Different losses in there, and then I still had them at 12-4 at the end because I do have them. I had them losing at the Eagles and then losing the Rams, so to get to 12-4. So the Rams thing is a game that's out there. It's probably the most important remaining game, and that'll be December 27th. Week 16. So, okay. So after this game, we've got the Jets at the Seahawks. So we don't have to travel again for a little while. And then we go back east and face the Washington football team for the last remaining East Coast game. And then Rams at Seahawks and Seahawks at 49ers, which is currently scheduled to be played down the road from me here in Arizona in Glendale.
You notice that the county has said that the 49ers are no longer allowed to play games. It's got to be
so hard
at their field because it's getting too many people together, and the COVID rate in there is too high. So they are not allowing.
So they're basically going to be in training camp because they can't even go back to Santa Clara County, because once they go back to Santa Clara County, they have to quarantine for 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
So they literally are kicked out of their own home.
Yep. So they are the Glendale 49ers. for the next
hard.
month.
Really
It's awful.
Yeah.
I feel bad for them. I mean, they're the league's most injured team, and now they don't even have a stadium or a headquarters
or be able to be with their families and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
that's real,
and especially this time of year at the holidays. Like, it's just
that's a big sacrifice.
The 49ers have it rough this year. Let's just, yeah.
Any little empathy that you can have for the 49ers, this would be the time to pull it out.
It's easy to have empathy for them because they're bad. Although they beat the Rams for us.
Yes.
They pulled out a pretty major upset and beat the Rams, and I think we can all...
and I watched some of that game, Keith. I'm telling you right now, the 49ers are improving. And
they're a better team with Nick Mullins.
Time, and they're very well coached. In fact, one could argue they're probably one of the best coached teams in the NFL. I kid you not.
They are.
And
Shanahan's done a good job there.
And they're going to be scary by the time this is all said and done. I'm just going to say it right now. If they're in contention at all at the end, that game with the Seahawks at 49ers at the end of the year on January 3rd could have implications. Probably more so for the 49ers than the Seahawks. So we'll see how that goes. All right.
Yeah.
So last time you got us out of here, I'll do it this time. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
So find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of the shows on our own website where you can go and listen to anything you want. And find us on your favorite podcast app so that you get us in your feed every week. And you can also find us on YouTube where you can watch Bill and Keith talk in person on a recording. If you're into that sort of thing.
If you're into that thing, I mean, watching Bill talk on the recording is pretty nice. Being forced to be subjected to me is a little less nice, but it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. All right, here we go. So until next time, Keith, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.